Welcome, everyone. We are live with another episode of Level Up Law, where every Tuesday at noon, South Carolina Legal Services levels up your legal knowledge about an area of law that we practice in. I am attorney Susan Ingalls, here with our producer, Kenneth Elliott, today. And we are going to be talking about a recent report from the Federal Trade Commission and how they have described their efforts and some of the results of their efforts when it comes to addressing fraud and consumer issues in communities of color. And so, first of all, let's talk about why we are doing this episode. This is the week of Martin Luther King Day, and we thought that it was appropriate to address some of these issues. And what better way to do it than to see what the FTC has reported in what they have issued. Now, they issued this back in October, 3 or 4 months ago in 2021. And it's a very comprehensive, about a 50-page report, so it's pretty comprehensive about how they have addressed these issues in communities of color. And just before we get started into the report, just want to mention that the Federal Trade Commission is a federal government agency, and basically their mission is to protect all consumers from unfair and deceptive practices in the marketplace. And so one of the things that they do is to address communities of color and other population segments as particular focus. But before we get started, we do want you to know that there's no legal advice here. It's just general information for the public. And if you do need the help of a lawyer, whether it be about fraud or a scam or anything else that we handle here at Legal Services, definitely call our intake line. We'll give all that information at the end of this presentation. And also, as a reminder, all of our episodes, thanks to our excellent producer, Kenneth Elliott, are posted pretty quickly on our YouTube channel. So you can find all the previous episodes there. You'll be able to find this one there. And hopefully you can get some good information on any topic that you have a need or an interest in. So let's go ahead and get started with communities of color. What's the Federal Trade Commission doing, and how consumers like you can help? Now, back in 2014, the Federal Trade Commission launched something called the Every Community Initiative. And, you know, previous to that, they had, I guess, more of a broad view of the marketplace and consumers in the marketplace. But with this particular initiative, they really started to focus on communities of color and certain population segments, realizing that, different populations and communities are affected in many different ways when it comes to these consumer issues. And so they started to really focus on that. And here's kind of a little bit of a laundry list of the focus communities and populations that they started to really look at. Now, what do they do to protect the consumers in those communities, in those population segments, right? What are they doing? Well, they bring enforcement actions for violations of consumer protection laws, and hopefully with the plan to shut down fraud and address any other consumer issues besides fraud, because there are many that affect communities of color. They also maximize the availability and the accessibility of their education materials to those communities. They have a wealth of materials in all kinds of different media and formats, and they've done a really great job of providing other languages with those materials. They also conduct research to identify and to target frauds that and other consumer issues, of course, that are out there and are affecting communities of color. They want to see, you know, how they're being affected, what particular types of fraud or consumer issues, you know, are they seeing in different areas, different populations, and so they conduct a lot of surveys and collect a lot of data about that, and we'll be talking about that a little bit today. They also work with partners, state, local, community. They work with diverse media outlets. Now, when we say diverse media outlets, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about media outlets that target, have a target audience that is a particular segment of the population. Maybe it's community of color, maybe it's a Spanish-speaking community, or things like that. And so they really have broadened out to more of those kinds of outreach outlets to get their materials out. So that's good. Now, so first, let's talk about these enforcement actions by the FTC. There's several different kinds or categories of enforcement actions that are discussed in the report that came out in October. So let's look at some of those. Auto buying cases. And before we get into the specific types, you'll find that sometimes the description of the case is that the defendant that they are bringing an action against allegedly did something. This is usually because most of these cases don't go to a decision by a court, a judge, or jury in a courtroom. Quite often, they are resolved by a consent order, where the defendant, agrees in some way to correct the bad activity or the bad behavior by taking certain actions or ceasing certain actions. And quite often there's a fine involved, and also monetary relief to the individuals that were affected by it. So that happens quite a bit, that there's a consent order that resolves it. So let's talk about the auto buying cases. Now, these actions that they have taken at the FTC recently have involved, these are just three examples. A company that blatantly discriminated against Black and Latino car buyers. Now, here at South Carolina Legal Services, we do see that quite a bit. Also, cases where the defendant falsified information on the applications and contracts of the Navajo people. And another example is a company that targeted the Latino community with deceptive ads that were in Spanish language. So there's a lot of fraud and violation of consumer protection laws in that auto buying industry to be careful of. So they definitely have a focus there. Another focus of their enforcement actions recently have been for-profit colleges. So in these cases, defendants, as an example, were targeted. They targeted Latinos and also military consumers using ads that are creating, false impressions about the college that's being promoted, and also about possible job opportunities. Lots of times they, want you to think that you're going to have a job, no problem, when you complete their program, but quite often that's not the case, and they know it when they put that in their information. So you have to be careful about that. And that kind of false advertising, the FTC is going to look at really closely, and in this case, they did something about it. Also, defendants in a case targeted Spanish speakers with false promises of student loan forgiveness, and charged illegal upfront fees as well. So, you know, you can't encourage someone to go into debt with a student loan by saying, but your loan will be forgiven. You know, they don't know that. And although there are loan forgiveness programs with federal loans, yeah, you just don't know with particular ones whether or not that's going to be available to you. And certainly these companies cannot promise that to you. And also, it's important to point out that in the student loan debt relief cases that the FTC has collected data on, there's definitely a significant disproportionate impact on Black communities. Here's another one that they have pursued, and I'm glad to see it: scammers posing as government officials. Because we all want to, you know, follow what we're supposed to when it comes to issues with the government, right? But there are so many scammers out there that are posing as some sort of government or government-related entity. So a couple of examples here of enforcement actions by the FTC recently was a defendant who marketed prepaid cards to Black and Latino customers, allegedly saying they were like Visa and MasterCard, easy to use, load some money on them. But either the cards didn't work, they couldn't use them, or they lost all the money that they put on them because it went to the scammers. Another example is a case where the defendants pretended to be the government or affiliated with the government, several of those kind of cases. They market, in one case, bogus immigration form preparation services and language courses to Spanish speakers. So there's so many examples of that, but posing as government officials. But these are just, you know, just a couple of those. And, you know, you have to be careful when somebody says they're, you know, related to the government. We see so many advertisements or posts that are put on social media or emails, you know, spam emails that we get, where it's very tempting to think that they, in fact, are the government or some other entity. And the next thing you know, you have clicked on something that has caused you to lose quite a bit of money. So trying to fight that, and we'll talk a little bit about what you can do to help towards the end of this presentation. Another thing that the FTC has focused on recently is pandemic products. And a lot of scammers and marketers are you know, realizing that everybody's got concerns, whether it be about their health, whether it be about you know, even job loss and things like that. But there are a lot of products out there that are promoted as prevention, treatment, cure, etc. for COVID-19. And in a number of cases, the FTC has seen that these products are specifically marketed to Spanish, Korean, and Vietnamese speaking communities. So beware of those. And, you know, also, let me just go back to the pandemic products. You know, recently the government has put out information about how to get free COVID tests. So be sure that when you're getting your free COVID test that you're using the right phone number or website that is the government sponsored. Okay, small business scams is another one. You know, especially when times are tough or you've got a job loss and maybe you have some other skill and you sort of got that desire to be an entrepreneur and start your own business. That's great. That's the American way. But you have to be careful, and this is something the FTC is looking at. Business opportunities, pyramid schemes, and things like that. There have been cases where the defendants that they brought actions against made false promises about how you, potential earnings from a business opportunity, and they targeted Latino communities directly, and also with conduct that had a disproportionate impact on communities of color, not just the Latino community, but other communities of color. Now, one last category of enforcement actions are in the area of debt, credit, and credit reporting. Those can definitely affect communities of color in a disproportionate way. So there have been enforcement actions on payday lending, credit, and consumer reporting accuracy. This is something we talked about in our last episode of Level Up Law, where we talked about how to dispute errors on credit reports and other consumer reports that might have a negative report on you that is in error. So that accuracy. Also, enforcement actions regarding tenant screening and housing. So let's now talk about the outreach and the education that the Federal Trade Commission engages in. Here's some of the methods that they use to conduct outreach and education. Okay, and these are all great ways to get the information out there. Listening to communities, engaging ethnic and community media. We talked about this a moment ago. Maybe radio or TV stations who have a target audience that the FTC is trying to focus on. They connect with trusted partners. We'll talk a little bit more about the details of that. They have storytelling strategies. And actually, let me just say, the trusted partners, those are usually state agencies and organizations that are working with consumers. In fact, here at Legal Services, we would be one of those trusted partners. We do have a lot of connection with what the FTC is doing, and we provide them information about what we see here in South Carolina. And then, okay, next, storytelling strategies. Now, the FTC has a couple of cool things on their website. One is a photo novella series. And for those of you who don't know what that is, this particular series is graphic novels that are in Spanish. So how cool is that? And I think those seem to be, according to statistics, really effective. They also have another series of videos, I believe, on how fraud affects every community. I think it's called the Fraud Affects Every Community series, actually. They also, as I said earlier, they provide a lot of educational resources at the FTC, and they do that in other languages. And here's just an example of a website that is fully in Spanish that's a mirror image of the FTC's website. Also, COVID-19 resources. They have a particular coronavirus page on their website that has a lot of those links and connections to really good information about products and scams and quite a laundry list of coronavirus issues. And then also, online reporting improvement is one of their goals. And as some of you out there may know, just a year or two ago, I guess, they launched the website called reportfraud.ftc.gov. This is a great website where you can go and report fraud, scams, any of that kind of thing that happens to you. And they encourage you to do that, even if there's nothing that can be done to get your money back or to correct the behavior or anything like that. They still want to know what your experience was. The more reports they get, the more information they have, and the more they can put A, B, and C together and figure out who some of these scammers are, and be able to locate them and or bring enforcement actions of the laws that they're violating against them. So that's a great new feature that they have, and they're always doing things like that. And I just wanted to note, as you'll see on the slide, when they launched that website, their consumer reports that people reported to them, of course, using that website, all the reports went up like 27%. So that is, that's really a great testament to how good that website is and the extent to which they really promoted it out there in the marketplace to the consumers. And just a little bit more of a deep dive on some of those. The community partners, the trusted partners, they have done things like, and will continue to do things like, convene these groups together and have roundtable discussions and things like that, so they can collaborate with those of us who are kind of out here in the community, working with these issues with consumers. So that's a really great thing that they do, having listening sessions and roundtable discussions and things like that. And they also work with national groups, some of which are listed here. NAACP, Legal Services Corporation, who we get funding from here at South Carolina Legal Services. The National Association of Consumer Advocates, there's National Consumer Law Center, and many others, and they work with those to reach those communities of color. So good collaboration there. Now also they work with local organizations. You can see some examples here, whether it be faith-based, housing organizations, libraries, tribal governments, and many other organizations like that that are more local than national or statewide. So those are really good as well. And as I've already mentioned, their consumer education materials are in multiple formats and languages. So that's been a great development, and they continue to just do a great job with that. And I mentioned here that all of their materials are free. You can go on their website, you can download a brochure, download a blog or a fact sheet. They've got plenty of videos on particular things that I think are really informative. So I encourage you to go to ftc.gov to check all that out. And then, of course, as we've mentioned, they responded and continue to respond to the impact of COVID-19 and the pandemic. So they've created a lot of educational materials about that. And of course, as I mentioned in the last slide, they do have that particular focus of that web page on their website for those resources. Okay, the data. We'll talk here about just some highlights from the report back in October that shows that there are disparities in the reports from these different communities. So Consumer Sentinel is the network that is used for these complaints, and so they are able to pull data from that and make some observations, I guess. So here's one observation, and that is that communities with different demographic populations reported different types of concerns, but at different rates also. So, for example, people living in majority Black communities, according to the report, filed higher percentages of reports to the FTC than majority white communities that when it was related to credit bureaus, banks, and lenders, used cars, and then also debt collection. People living in majority Latino communities filed higher percentages of reports than majority white communities regarding credit bureaus, banks and lenders, debt collection, auto issues, and also business opportunities. And I think we mentioned that before about the heavy focus of that in the Latino communities when it comes to the business opportunities. And I think in some of those communities, the investment for the business opportunity, the highest percentage anyway, is like under $500. let's talk about the differences in the payment method that is used by these different communities. So the report found that people who were living in majority Black and Latino communities filed a higher percentage of reports where the method of payment on the financial transaction, the fraud, the scam, or whatever, the payment method was debit card, cash, cryptocurrency, and money orders. And that was a higher percentage of those than communities that were majority white. Now, people living in the Black and Latino communities filed a lower percentage of reports that involved payment by credit card. And just keep in mind that, credit cards are actually have more fraud protection than these other payment methods like debit cards and so forth. And interesting to note that in the majority white communities, 28% of the complaints were transactions involving credit cards. In the Black community, majority Black communities, that was a 27% debit cards, not credit cards, but debit cards. And then also in majority Latino communities, there was 24% of complaints involving transactions where a debit card was used. So I think that's important and interesting to note, and I'm sure is something that the FTC will, focus on in their outreach and education with those communities, really highlighting the differences between a credit card and a debit card. The debit card being one that pulls money directly out of your checking account, the credit card being handled more by a separate company that has a fraud department, and you can report fraud and they look into it and quite often do something about it. Okay, disparities in communities impacted by fraud and other consumer issues. So in FTC cases that involved payday loans, student debt relief programs, and business opportunities, the largest number of consumers affected by those types of fraud and consumer protection violations was people residing in predominantly Black communities. So that is also something to think about, that if you are, more connected with that predominantly Black community, really watch out for those payday loans, student debt relief, and those fake business opportunities. Especially with payday loans and student debt relief, I believe that it was a number of people who, I guess, made complaints, or no, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, who made complaints and had purchased these student debt relief programs and payday loan applications, and the number in predominantly Black communities was 200% higher as far as those complaints than in predominantly white communities who reported. I think that's a very significant number. We really need to pay attention to that. And then let's just talk about the negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, because these negative effects are something that the Commission is definitely focusing on according to their report. And you can just see here that they note that scammers are preying on people's fears, and Black, Latino, and Native American households have been much more impacted by the coronavirus pandemic, whether it be illness, job loss, stress, transportation, housing, and all of those sorts of things. Definitely those communities have been disproportionately impacted. And the majority of those households do report serious financial problems. Anything from, using up all their savings to not being able to even pay for food and a roof over their head. Also, they face problems with internet connectivity, which can impact, of course, employment and schoolwork, especially obviously during a pandemic. A computer and internet access you need to have if you're being required to work remotely, or if your school is not meeting in person but doing e-learning. You've got to have a computer and internet access. And there are some schools and school districts who are finding ways to help students who don't have that, but it's definitely an impact when it comes to employment and schoolwork and other things as well. For example, with the FTC and other consumer reporting agencies, or consumer protection, I should say, agencies, so many of them, they have online complaint systems. Now, you can also call, you can also do it in written form, but the easier way to do it is through online. And if you don't have a computer and internet access, you can't make a complaint to the FTC. It's the FPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is another federal government agency, or even here in South Carolina at our Department of Consumer Affairs. You can make a complaint calling in and filing a written complaint, but so many of these type of things now are done online. Sometimes, not with those three, but even with others, it's even hard to find the written form to be able to do it that way. So consumers are forced to try to find a way to get that internet access, hopefully at a library or something of that nature. So what can you do as a consumer to help with these efforts by the FTC and others? Okay, let's talk about that just briefly before we close. Here's the main thing: educate yourself. There's so much information out there, and you need to get your information from these government sources, not from just Googling consumer protection. You need to go to ftc.gov, consumerfinance.gov, consumer.sc.gov. These are your the government agencies that are charged with protecting consumers, among other things. So educate yourself and arm yourself, against violations of the consumer protection laws by using the tools that these entities provide. Again, all of the tools are free, the resources are free, and it's such great information. And more, especially with the FTC, they're putting it into a format that is really viewer friendly, reader friendly, and so it's a lot easier to have that information soak in and mean something to you. It's not just a bunch of text or something. So use the education and the tools that you have to protect yourself. Okay? You are the first line of defense for yourself, because you're the one that these scams and frauds start with. So be careful. Don't just click on something, whether it be email, text message, or other message like that. Don't just click on it because it looks like it would be helpful, or it looks like an important concern. I just the other day got a scam email that said it was from Experian, which is one of the 3 credit reporting agencies, and alerting me about a problem on my credit report. And I didn't think there was a problem with my credit report, but you never know, and you get worried, and that's what they're hoping, that you'll click on that because you're worried. But I looked at the email address, and it was clearly, a fake email address. It was not from Experian. And so you just got to look closer before you click on things like that. Be vigilant. Don't just be careful, be vigilant. Look carefully again at those senders. Does the website that they're putting out there, is it a real website or is it something fake? The ones that you want to pay attention to are the websites that have .gov at the end, like these here on this slide, FTC.gov, consumerfinance.gov, and so forth. For example, IRS.gov. That's the legit website for the IRS. But you might get an email or a message that says, oh, the IRS, is about to, take your home, or, trying to scare you to death about something like that. But if you look at the email or where this message comes from, it might say something like theirs.com or something like that. Well, that is not the legit website because it doesn't have .gov on the end. So those are some of the types of things that you can do to protect yourself and be vigilant. Also, as I said, get those, use those resources that these entities have on their websites, but they also have ways for you to receive information just automatically. So, for example, the FTC has, consumer alerts. Our South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs has a similar, email update, and they have, webinars about areas of concern. I think on once a month on Wednesdays, you can sign up for those if you're on their email list. And then just webinars from all these places, whether it be FTC, as I said, Department of Consumer Affairs, and then the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has similar things as well. So there's a wealth of information out there. That's where you want to get it from, the .gov, okay? Not everybody else that's got websites or entities that are trying to make money on you, whether it be a fraudulent way to make money or a legitimate way to make money by providing information that you can actually get for free from the .govs. So be careful. That's just a quick review of the FTC's report on their efforts to address fraud and consumer issues that are affecting communities of color. As you can see, there's a lot going on. But again, you can help by being proactive. If something happens to you, report it. Here's the websites that you can report to. That's really important, again, that they get that information. Sometimes these scammers and hackers are hard to find. Once your money's gone, they're gone too, and you can't find them, and therefore you can't get your money back. But the more information that they have about your particular situation, the more they can connect the dots and hopefully find these people. So that's it for us today. As promised, I have here the information about how to get in touch with South Carolina Legal Services. We have telephone intake Monday through Thursday, 9 to 6. That intake office is closed on Friday, but you can apply online 24/7, and we encourage you to do that. And just stay connected with us. We have 2 websites, a great YouTube channel where these videos and others can be found. And we also have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and even LinkedIn, which isn't mentioned here, but we also are on LinkedIn. So check us out on all those social media outlets and on our website. And definitely you can sign up for our newsletter on the website. You can like us, follow us on social media. And in particular, since we do post all of these presentations on our YouTube channel, it will really help us out, and I think help you out if you go there and subscribe to the channel and sign up for the notifications. So you want to get that alert every time that we post a new video, because if you didn't register to attend it live, you can certainly go and see if it's something that is going to be helpful to you as a consumer and as a potential client of ours. So I hope you did find this helpful and you'll go there. We will link below the full text of the FTC's report. You can also find it on their website. But there's a lot of detail there that is quite interesting and revealing. So I encourage you to go and have a look. Now, be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Level Up Law, where two of our attorneys in our Charleston office will be talking about a recent successful case that they handled that had to do with human trafficking. You know, it's Human Trafficking Prevention Month, January. So we're going to close that out with a really great presentation from Elliot Tate and Dulcie down there in Charleston. So that promises to be really interesting. They'll be talking about how that client came to us, what they noticed about what was going on with her, and how they helped her to walk through the issues that she was having and hold the perpetrators responsible. So be sure and tune in next Tuesday at noon. You can register by checking out, if you're, subscribed to our YouTube channel or social media, Facebook. You can register there. You can register on our website. Just go look on our calendar, any of the Tuesdays. You can just click and register, and that's awesome because you can see it live, and then you can ask questions about subject matter sometimes. So that's always helpful to you. But at the same time, on any of our Level Up Law videos, we do keep an eye on them. So if you have comments or you have a particular subject that you'd like us to address, definitely put it in the comments below and we'll find it there. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but definitely eventually and pretty quickly. So thanks everybody for tuning in. That concludes today's webinar.